Welcome everyone to this Let's Play of Kerbal Space Program 1.1.3, also known as Turbocharged. Now, at the end of the last episode, we had been building this luxury Mun lander. But there was a mistake that I made at the end of that episode. Hopefully you can see that staring you in the face right now. You'll notice that all of the science experiments appear to have taken up a symmetry of 4. That was when I was adjusting the various experiments in order to fit them more neatly to the body. So we are going to have to fix that. So let's get on with that first. It's just a matter of making sure down here we have a symmetry of 1, and then just basically picking up and plopping them back down. So let's do that with these two mystery goo units. With this barometer and with this antenna. So I think if we now whiz round this body, we can see there's no duplication of those experiments. It wasn't a problem with these ones up here on the top, for example, the orbital telescope. It was just these ones around the side. I was just fitting them in more neatly underneath the mobility enhancer, otherwise known as a ladder. So we don't need to change that. I don't think, no, we didn't make a mistake here with the thermometer or the negative gravioli detector. We didn't make that mistake. Right, we now have, as we can see in front of us, a finished Mun Lander Mark 1. Or at least this is the lander part, so let's just save that. We do have to now get this to the Mun and get it landed. And of course, we do that in reverse order. So this is going to be the vehicle that's going to be doing the landing, the taking off and coming back to Kerbin. And we can use Kerbal Engineer Redux to work out exactly how much delta V we have in this vehicle and exactly what we are going to be able to do with it. Now, of course, working backwards, we're not currently on Kerbin. Working backwards, we would be on the Mun, and of course the Mun has no atmosphere. So this gives us a list of all of our vital statistics, including our thrust-to-weight ratio whilst on the Mun, and a healthy 5.74. And a delta V, this is our important part. This top stage here has a delta V of 1600 meters per second, just a little bit over 1600 meters per second. Now, you can go on the internet and find yourself a delta V chart, and these come in the form of a sort of a railway, a subway, or a tube diagram, a little coloured diagram that gives you figures on how much delta V you're going to need. Now, the one I've got here tells me to get to the Mun, I'm going to need 860. Well, let's call that 900. From an intercept to a circular orbit, we're going to need a further 310, so let's call that 300, so that's 1200 in total. And then we're going to need 580 to land, so let's call that a very thin 600, so that's 1500 delta V. 1500 delta V, yes, we've got 900, 600 is 1500. So we've got barely enough to get us to and down, but not enough to get us back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build another stage immediately below this one, and that's going to be our transfer and partial landing stage. We'll sort of jettison it just as we arrive at the surface. So we're going to need, what, sort of 900... did I get that up right? 900, 1200. No, we're going to need 1700, so we're 100 short. If we're going to do the whole thing with just this entry. So we're going to get at least 1200. So let's see if we can get another 1600 delta V. And just to be on the optimistic side, that has to be in Kerbin with no atmosphere. So let's just compact that down. So that's going to be from a circular orbit around Kerbin to the Mun. So let's see if we can cram on about another 1600. So let's go to, my math is terrible, so let's see if we can cram on another 1600. So let's get ourselves a decoupler, and obviously we will need a protective shell. We'll worry about actually setting up the protective shell in a minute. But what we will do is we will get ourselves a double tank. We'll get us one of these Rockomax X200 32s, and we will go with another one of these Poodle engines. So this is going to be the basics of our next stage, and that's going to be about another 1400. So that's not too bad. 1400 isn't too bad. Let's see what happens when we build our fairing. So right click on the fairing and just bring this up to the top. How far should we go? Go to about there, and then close ourselves up. Can we close? There we go. So close. So that's going to give us about 1300 delta V with the weight of the fairing included. And to be honest, I don't think that's probably quite enough. So let's delete that fairing. So right click and delete fairing. And what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to add a few extra tanks right here on the side, just to give us a little bit of extra fuel. So let's go for these FLT 400s, and we'll have 4 of those. So X, X, X to give us 4 of those tanks. There we go. We're going to get some. Do we need? Well, let's put some of these aerodynamic nose cones on anyway, and let's rotate them around with the rotate tool, just so they look a little bit prettier. Just drag that around. There we go. So those are on. And a little trick I've seen quite a lot of people do is just get these, or not the big one, the small one, just get these heat shields. These heat shields do make quite nice sort of end caps for these sorts of uses. So that's looking pretty good. But of course our fuel is stuck in these outer tanks. So let's use the move tool just to pull these tanks out of the way. How far can we move them? That's as far as we can move them, but that's fine. That's fine, because what we're going to do, we're going to hide a fuel line right inside. So let's get right inside here. What we're going to do is look through our tank. Can we get right in? How close can we get? Not that close. Let's come down, and there we go. Put that in there, and if we, oh, that's not straight, but it doesn't actually matter, because what we're going to do is we're going to try and hide these pipes behind the tanks. That's probably not going to work. Now, one of the things I find with hiding pipes, or even pipes in general, if you put the two ends of the pipe too close together, when the ship, the craft, is rendered on the launch pad, it builds these pipe ends and just connects them literally together, so you still don't get any fuel flow. So what we're going to do is squeeze that in there, and then just make sure you come quite a way away from the two ends, so the two ends aren't right next to each other. So let's go back to the move tool and just then push this back in. Now we can just about see that pipe end there, but if we go to switch the snap off and we just grab hold of the handle, come on, and then just push it in just a little bit, there we go. We've lost sight of that unsightly pipe, and that now means we have 1,850 units of fuel in this lower stage, so we can now rebuild the bottom stage, including an additional fairing. We'll put the fairing on the next stage. So let's just save that and go for a build of the next launcher section. So this is the section that's going to transfer us to the MUN, and is going to do some of our landing. We'll just discard it with this decoupler as necessary. So let's just let's have a look. That needs to go there, but we don't need. We've got to check on this staging. Let's move that down. There we go, because we want these parachutes for our return journey. So we definitely don't want them staging whilst we are using this engine. So let's just save that. So we still have, there we go, we've got our 1600 in the top stage for a little bit of landing and the return. We've got 1800 to get us to the Mun and a little bit of our landing. So next we want our in-atmosphere figures. You can ignore these figures now because obviously they're not that useful in the atmosphere. That'll be used in the atmosphere. But now we're going to build our lower stage, and this is going to be a fairly straightforward stage. Let's go and get our decoupler. Where's our decoupler? We want another one of these decouplers. And what we're going to use is we're going to use some of our orange tanks. So let's just go and get an orange tank for size. There we go. So that's our orange tank. That is going to be the central core of our stage. We will want our aerodynamic fairings. There's the fairing. Let's just drop that. Go on, put it away. No, go. Oh, let's finish the fairing. Let's have a look. Up you go. Close in. Up. 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 And then we're just going to close in the nose like so. There we go. So there's our fairing. Wasn't going to put that in first, but we're there now. We might have to change it though. It looks a bit bulky down here at the bottom. Let's worry about one thing at a time. There is our central core. So this is going to be the central core of our vehicle. So let's go and get this. Is going to be quite massive. So we are going to have to go up on the mainsail engine. So there's our mainsail. That is going to be the main propellant for the upper part of the atmosphere. Now the rest of it, I'm going to go for a three-way asparagus stage, and I don't think I'm going to be able to fit that in with that fairing, so let's just delete that for the moment, and we'll rebuild it later. What we're going to do is we're going to get some of our favourite T70 radial decouplers, and we're going to cram these in down here. Let's just put the snap on with the C key and then just go round to two-way symmetry. There we go, two-way symmetry. And we're going to get more orange tanks. This is going to be a pretty beefy stage, so let's put those on. I'm not going to use more mainsails. Instead, I'm going to go down one and we're going to use the RE15 Skipper. So let's use those. Don't worry about the staging for a moment. We're going to have to sort the staging out. That's going to be a pain in the neck, the staging. And next we need to do fuel flow. We're not going to be able to hide the fuel lines in this case. We're just going to have to put them in and bear with the unsightliness. So let's just snap that in there like so. So that's that. Now, the next part is how we're going to do these aerodynamic nose cones. Now I've seen two ways of doing this. One way of doing it is using these fuel containing brand adapters. These are the C7 brand adapters, and they do contain some liquid fuel and oxidizer. But the problem with these is they're a little bit tall, and I don't want to pull these down too far, because if I'm going to put a parachute, let's go and get a parachute. We're going to use these large MX, what are they, MX? No, M Mark 16 XL parachutes. It's going to be really hard to build the fairing and still have them deployed. So there are other ways of doing it. So what I thought we might do is another one is just to get the aerodynamic nose cones, which are these nose cones right here. Now you can't attach to these nose cones, not directly, but I've seen Ruben on Kerbal Space Command do this little trick, and this is using our ever useful where is our ever useful cubic octagonal strut, which you can place pretty much on anything. Let's go and get our chute back. So let's plonk our chute there on the top. Looks a bit unsightly at the moment, but what we're going to do is we're going to use our move tool, and we're going to take off the snap, and then we're just going to sink this into the top of the nose cone, and that looks pretty good actually. I do quite like that. So let's just move it over. There we go, just move it over so it looks symmetrical, and that does kind of work. There we go. So that looks pretty good, but I just think that's a little bit fiddly. I'm not a fan of that myself. It works really well, and if you like the aesthetic, it works really well. But me, I tend to go for something a little more functional, and it's also a little bit shorter, a little bit stubbier, which is just to put some of these adapters on the top. These are the Rocamax brand adapters Mark II, and just put the chutes on the top of that. So let's put the chutes on the top of that. I mean, it's not as pretty, it's not as functional, but it is less fiddly. It's definitely less fiddly. They've gone into the wrong stage, but again, don't worry about that. And I just think it's a little simpler, it's a little easier to put together. Let's just save that while I remember. This clearly doesn't have enough fuel in that stage. Let's just fiddle these sections. Let's just move this part of the staging around. Still only got in this bottom stage here and this stage here, even if you add those together, we've still only got about 2,000. We need about 3,500 delta V to get into orbit, and we are still a bit low on the old thrust to weight ratio. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this section. Before I do so, I'm just going to save. And so I'm going to click here and just copy this section. So there we go. I just alt-clicked. And I'm going to squeeze this in. Hopefully, if I put C back on, the snap back on, and see if I can get this to line up neatly here. There we go. So that's that, and alt-click again, and I want to snap this in here, so let's just get that lined up. There we go. So that's straight. That's the 6th set or 3rd pair of tanks. There we go. So they're nicely lined up, but of course all the asparagus staging is wrong. So this is the last tank to go. So what I'm going to do is just reach in here, get the fuel duct, and just for neatness sake I'll use the lines in the tank to get those lined up, and then I'm going to reach in here, pick that fuel duct out, and do exactly the same thing here. There we go, and put that in there. So that's our asparagus staging linked up. Again, we're going to have to sort out the staging, so we're going to have to do that. What else should we do? Well, let's have a look at getting some of these aerodynamic fins on. I do like the AV8 winglets. If we can squeeze some of those in here, 6-way symmetry. Is that going to cut the fuel line if we put that in there? Let's have a look. Nope, doesn't cut the fuel line. So that's good. So those, they're a little bit further, too far down. So let's just move those up. There we go. What I'm going to do actually, because in a few seconds I'm going to add something else. That's going to give us a little bit of extra aerodynamic stability and ability to turn. And ability to turn is something else that we're going to have a problem with in space. So I'm going to have some of these place anywhere linear RCS ports, and I'm going to stick 6 of them down here just for symmetry's sake. There we go, just for symmetry's sake. And that will enable us to turn this core a little bit easier when we're in space, because I'm guessing we'll probably have some of this core left behind. And in order to fuel that, let's get some RCS. I could put a big RCS tank here on the top, but there's absolutely no point because we won't need that much RCS fuel. So what we could do is sneak in, we don't need that one, we probably only need these. These are these Stratus 5s, so let's just line those up. Is it 5 of those? No, I only got 2, so let's get symmetry up to 6. There we go. And I will also use the move tool just to offset them into the tank. There we go. So there we go. So they look a little bit more like they're supposed to be there. So that'll just give us a little bit of RCS fuel for maneuvering. So that's space maneuvering, because obviously these AVR8 winglets won't be that much use in space. Now, these tanks are going to wobble around quite considerably, so we will need some of our struts. Let's see if we can get these in place. Have a look. That's only 2, isn't it? So let's just pick that up and see if we can get 6 going. There we go. So let's just click on that. There we go. So that gives us, it's not very neat. Let's go down quite a bit further to there. Now you've got to be very careful. If you go a bit too far towards the parachute, they will actually attach to the parachute. So do be careful about that. There we go. Oh, that's much better. That's much better. So let's quickly save that. So that gives us all of our strutting. We will need some of these TT18A launch stabilizers. So let's get. I don't think we're going to be able to get 6-way symmetry. Now, if you try to go 2-way symmetry, it actually attaches both to this tank. So if I click that on there, you'll see it's actually rather badly attached, the second one. So what we're going to do, I'm just going to have to do these in pairs. So let's pair this one up. Is that right? Where's the other one? Yep, there you go. So that's that one. Get that one into here. So that's going to be like so. And finally, get this one lined up like so. There we go. So that is our 6. Those are our 6 launch stabilizers. Now, next, I think we ought to sort out our staging. That is going to be a bit of a pain because we've got all these parachutes mixed up with all of these different decouplers. So let's get all of our engines down into the bottom stage. That's definitely going to be true. So let's move that down into the bottom stage. So that should be all of our engines. So let's just come out a little bit. So that's our main, our mainsail. That is our, got 1, 2. Those are our 2 engines that are going to go last. Then we've got that pair and we've got that pair, so that's fine. So all of our launch stabilizers, they're all in this bottom stage. Let's just grab another stage for our decouplers. Now, the ones that are going to go first are these ones in here. So can I grab, if I close in, can I grab, there we go. So that is actually the bottom set. That set there is the first stage to go. And they go with that set of parachutes, which is this bottom set here. So let's move those down. Excellent. The next stage to go will be these, which is actually the next set to go. And the parachutes are this pair. Okay. So let's put that in. So that should leave this pair and that set. Yeah, that's perfect. So let's save that. And as we can see, we haven't got very much delta V in these 3 or 4 bottom stages. We've got 1500, 2000, maybe 2500. But of course, not all of that will be in atmosphere. Not all of that will be in the thickest part of the atmosphere at the bottom. So we've got to take that into account as well. So that is that. And next, I think we should build our fairings. Let's see how small a fairing we can make. Let's have a look. Can we place this cross section? There we go. So let's come in. Is that too close? Nope, that's fine. Don't think we're going to clip any of the parts. And then we can start ducking in towards the nose cone. If you just watch that right in the middle of the screen, just below the protective shell dialog, you can see left mouse button to place section. So let's see, where can we, I think we're probably a little bit too close to one of the parts below. So let's replace that cross section. There we go, that's a lot better. And then close. There we go, close the fairing. A little bit pointy, but that should be just fine. Let's just quickly save that. So let's recap what we have. We got our 4 stages overall. So we got the center core here, and then 3 asparagus stages around the outside. The asparagus stages are using the Skipper liquid fuel engine, but our central core is using the mainsail. That's just to keep up our total thrust to weight ratio. 1.4 is a smidgen on the low side, but it should be just fine. We've got our parachutes. Now, what I remember, let's set our recovery pressure to 0.4 for all of our sets of parachutes. They will set in pairs, so we only have to set 3, and that will set the other pair. There we go. So that's just to prove it, that's also set to 2.4. Let's just save this as well. We've got our asparagus fuel line set up correctly. There's the one in the side. We've got our AV8 winglets. We've got a little bit of fuel in there, monopropellant fuel for our place anywhere. You can just, if I squeeze right in there, you can see the place anywhere linear jets. We have in here our transfer tank. Under here we have our poodle engine, and we have these little extra side tanks here just to carry a little bit of extra fuel, with our little gimmick of these little heat shields just to make sort of end caps there. And at the top we have the vehicle you've already seen, the lander itself. So that all that really remains is to give this a bit of a test flight. And we're going to do that in the next episode. So I'd like to thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.